Good morning, everybody. Dave Schmidt along with Matt Nestor and producer Tom Warner. Good to have you along on the State Line Sports Hour. We're going to talk some high school basketball. And when we came in today, we were talking before the show. So it seems like a lot of people in the media, especially the Chicago media and the suburbs, are saying no big-time basketball players in Illinois this year like we've had the last few years. And we'll find out about it because our friend from hsbball.com, Jack Gleason, is with us. How you doing, Jack?
Good. Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. Hey, is that a true statement? People are complaining a little bit. There's not any really high-profile players that are going to graduate in the class of 2016 this year, or do you have a couple that you like a lot?
I think what's happened is we've been really spoiled the last couple of years with some of the superstars that we've seen. Mm-hmm. The Jalen Brunsons of the world, Jafil Okafor, Anthony Davis, Parker, Derrick Rose, when you go back a little bit farther. So, no, there's no superstar-type player this year, but someone will always come to the forefront during the year. The guys I like right now, I like Charlie Moore and Morgan Park. Mm-hmm. He's a little undersized, but he's really competitive. This will be his fourth year. He played as a freshman as well. So he's a really tough kid. There's a kid coming up from Bogan named James Jones, that I was impressed with last year as a junior. He's about 6'5", 6'6", a good shooter from the outside that's starting to get some publicity here this summer. But I'm always cautious about summer ball. One of my favorite comments is saying that when I read about these kids that play AAU ball in the summer, they've all morphed into some mutant combination of Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and LeBron James.
Exactly.
And then I go see him play, and when the season starts, and I'm like, oh, he's kind of the same as he was last year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
so when you look at a year like that, where maybe there's no top-end talent, or at least nobody getting that recognition, when we're, kind of looking ahead at the season, maybe coming ahead, do you think that maybe it's going to be a little less predictable, maybe a little bit more parity when you look at who gets downstate?
It does look like that year. It seems that this year there's no standout team like there has been the last couple of years. You look back at last year, and Simeon Stevenson were heads and tails above everybody else. The year before it was Young. The year before that it was kind of Young and Simeon. So you're right, Matt. There doesn't seem to be a standout team this year that's, you'd say right now, here's your top two teams or so. So it'll be interesting as the season starts because someone will come out. Mm-hmm. Some team will look good. Some of the teams right now, if you look at what's happened last year, we had the underclassmen, a little bit as I read about what happens in the summertime, especially in June with the events that the teams play in. It looks like the main public league teams are going to be good again this year. Simeon, Bogan, Kenwood, Morgan Park. I think probably Curie beyond that is the next team. And then some of the suburban teams, Riverside Brookfield had a really young team last year, and they're all back, and they picked up one of Dave's favorite things, a transfer from Whitney Young. Fenwick's looking real good. They were really young last year. Evanston was very young. So there's some teams that had a lot of young players on, and as these kids mature, they may come to the forefront as the year goes on. But you're right. It should be a much more balanced year this year, and a fun year. And it shows, I think, by what I do in the summertime, I'm always more team-oriented, and you see that on the website, too. There's so many websites that talk about individual players, and that's really not my cup of tea. Mm-hmm. I don't really go to see individual players play. I always go to see teams play. I enjoy watching the players, and I know who they all are, but that's always been what interests me for some reason.
Jack, we had a transfer we found out about last week while we were talking about the East Summer League. Montrell Dixon, who started out at Freeport as a freshman and ended up in West Virginia last year. He was like a 3A All-Star, on the third team, and he had a good year. They went to the state tournament. He's like 6'6". He can play, and everybody at the East Summer League was telling me. So he's kind of snuck back into Illinois. You know anything about him, too?
No, I don't. Just what I read. I read your article about him, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. I don't recall. Was it West Virginia? Was that a normal high school, or was that a prep school?
No, it was a normal high. You know what? His older cousin is going to go to UIC this year, And Dikembe, they named him after, what's the name?
Mutombo?
Yeah, Mutombo. Anyway, he will be a senior this year, and he played last year at Mingo Central, which was a consolidation of 5 schools in the West Virginia area in Mingo County. And so I kind of understand why he might have left there was because his cousin left and the other 3 starters that they depended on left, so he would have been by himself. And so he's kind of coming back home. But I think he's a guy you might want to keep an eye on a little bit.
I will. And I think, didn't Freeport go pretty strong towards the end of the year?
Yes.
I know they got off to a rough start.
Got a great coach, too. Ryan Pierce has done a real good job. And this kid will come in real handy right now.
Good. That sounds good. There's been some interesting transfers. I know you've picked up on a couple of them. I think that the transfer of the Harrington kids from Whitney Young to Stevenson, that was fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall, a lot of those kids that go to Whitney Young, our parents are very well-to-do and they live downtown, and for some reason I thought that was the case with the Harringtons, but I could be getting mixed up with other players on that team. So, whether they obviously moved out that way, those 2 kids, Rodney, who's the senior, was really solid, especially as a sophomore when they won the state tournament. His younger brother, Willie, I think is a better player. He's going to be a junior. So that's interesting. And then they have a freshman who obviously I don't know anything about. But I wonder what that does make Stevenson now. They really they had one really strong player coming back as a sophomore to be a junior.
Yeah. One of the kids, the older kid, played somewhere else as a freshman before he transferred to Whitney.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like it's getting to be the freight train. And you know how I am, Jack. I'm sorry. But
and you're right. And what really scares me, and it's summertime and summer ball's going on now with AAU, is I see these kids, that's where I think they get influenced and they want to play with the better players. And just this last week, the article about Joey St. Pierre that's transferring from Richmond Burton to Laudemere, which is a school in Indiana, that's just scary to me. I see that happening, and it doesn't happen that often where these kids go to these prep schools out of state, but I feel, just from a jealous standpoint, I was looking forward to going up to Richmond Burton to see him play this year, and now he won't. Whitney Young had a situation like that where Joseph Toy was his name, who played as a sophomore and then went to Laudemere and then came back for his senior year at Whitney Young and was an all-public league player. So maybe this kid comes back, but that scares me. The whole AAU scares me because I just see stuff like that going on.
Well, and it really just seems like it's trends flowing down from the upper levels. I mean, you see that in basketball, and it really kind of, started off with LeBron James going to Miami a few years ago, but you see that a lot. Well, I want to play with this guy here, and they kind of team up and go. Now you're seeing that some in college. I was reading about the number 1 player in the country for next year, saying that he might be a package deal with the number 2 player. So you're starting to really see that a lot in the colleges where, all 3 of us are going to go to this school. And I think you're starting to see that some in high school now, too, where they say, well, I'm going to go play with this guy, and we're going to put together a super team.
Right. No, that's scary. I mean, you can even go a step farther. Sometimes when I see the AAU, I say to myself, why don't these guys say, hey, we're going to do this in the wintertime?
Mm-hmm.
And there's money involved here, and we can get the top players to play together, and we can set up our own league, somehow damage high school basketball. I mean, in essence, isn't that what's going on in some of the lower-level sports like girls volleyball and swimming and gymnastics? I realize that's a big stretch down the road, but every once in a while that pops into my mind. Now, in reality, it's probably akin to when you look at the NBA pulling these really good kids out of school after 1 year. Well, college basketball is doing fine.
Right.
So, I'm sure high school basketball would do fine, too. But that's again, that's a way off in the distance thought, but that concerns me sometimes. And I think a guy like Joey St. Pierre that's on a small scale is what's happening there. And I don't mean to demean him at all. I mean, he and his family think they're doing the right thing to put him in the best position to succeed. So, hey, great for him.
One thing we've talked a lot about here, and I don't know if it really is going to affect anything in the Chicago suburbs area too much, but has been the class changes. Is there been any drastic changes there in that area where you say, boy, this team's moving up or moving down and they could be dangerous?
No, I haven't seen that. And that whole class change, and I usually listen on Saturday mornings, hear what you guys have to say, and I did listen to that. I thought the Rockford Lutheran coach did a really good job, first class, talking about it. the double bump. But I haven't really seen that in the Chicago area, though, where somebody's jumped out at me right now. And I don't know what the answer is. I guess I do like the performance jump, but you can't do both of them. You can't do the multiplier and the performance jump. There's so many private schools that we just look at the top ones that are succeeding in sports. There's lots of them out there that don't really struggle. So maybe the performance thing is a way to deal with that.
You talk about Loudly Muir out of LaPorte. They actually have a team that's a prep school team that goes all around the country, and then they also have a team that's kind of like their JV, but they play varsity in Indiana. They play like Culver Academy, and they play some of the South Bend schools. I mean, that's really kind of competitive because you can put some kid down there and let him, kind of get loosened up a little bit and then bring him up to the big team. So it is becoming like a professional sport almost, isn't it, sometimes?
Right, it is. It is. No, I did notice that in my ever-ending search for scores in the wintertime.
Yeah.
I did notice that they had two teams. And so at least the kids that go there, that's a boarding school, obviously.
Expensive boarding school.
And a team.
Yeah. So, Christian Negron from Larkin, what do you think about him? That's one kid we hear a lot about. He's going to be here at our holiday tournament in Rockford.
Right. I have been impressed with him. He's been inconsistent, but obviously he's very young. So I'm really curious to see him this year. I read that he's doing well in the summertime, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what Larkin does. I think their coaching, Darren Carter being there, and he's been there a while now, has really turned that program around. They had the good year last year. So,
hey, Jack, we're going to have to take a break, but would you mind hanging on and coming back for another 15 minutes?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Good. Our good friend Jack Gleason is going to hang around with us. He'll be back because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about.
Don't you love Jack?
I do.
Yeah, Jack's our new favorite friend, and he listens. That's good.
There you go.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Jack Gleason in just a moment with more on the State Line Sports Hour here on News Talk 1440 WROK.